This person is unknown to me. Although Jane and I got married 12 years ago, our romance started when we were just 10 years old. I never really wanted to go to college, but as soon as I graduated from high school, I got a low-paying work at Desmond Engineering as a draftsman. Jane and I exchanged vows to get married a year later. We were incredibly thrilled when we welcomed our twin girls, Bethany and Brittany, the following year. Although the first few years were difficult, we finally improved our lot in life by learning to be frugal. Even though I was a few grades above my entry-level job, I was still employed as a draftsman. Even if the income was higher, money was still tight. Nevertheless, we had saved up enough money to buy a modest home and 2 respectable cars, not brand new, but not outdated either. Since our finances stabilized, Jane was able to pursue her ambition of being a housewife without ever having to leave the house. We were in great physical and mental health. Since her wedding day, Jane had gained a little weight, but not much. She looked like a smaller version of Marie Osmond, with dark brown hair done in bangs and standing little over 5 feet tall. I'm still the same person I was before. I was neither skinny nor flabby because I played football in high school as the right tackle. Billy Martin moved from Lancaster to Reading almost a year ago and found work as a surveyor with Desmond Engineering. Billy and I had already played football against one another and clicked right away. He wed a redhead called Luna, his high school sweetheart, who soon befriended Jane. They were excellent babysitters even if they were childless. As a nice diversion from our wives, Billy and I would frequently spend time together while we weren't working. Jane and Luna followed a similar schedule, going to parties and club meetings and shopping. Luna had also landed a secretarial position at Gilbert Engineering, just out of town, while Billy and I kept an eye on our daughters in front of the television. However, approximately 6 months ago, I started to notice some differences. Parent meetings used to only happen once a month, but they now appear to happen every week. Even though Luna was childless, she would frequently go to PTA meetings with Jane. Even though they never bought anything, they seemed to be attending more Tupperware and Magic Chef parties every month. They even became members of a book club, although they never seemed to have time to read. They would spend hours shopping on the weekends, but they would hardly purchase anything. I began to get concerned about these warning signs, but I didn't bring it up to Billy because he didn't seem to understand. If there was nothing to be concerned about, I didn't want to cause any trouble. Jane came home from what appeared to be a basket party an hour after putting our girls to bed. Before Luna picked her up, she showered, and she showered again as soon as she arrived home. I found this behavior to be strange. I decided to quickly check the laundry hamper while she was taking a shower and found a pair of black lace panties. I found it strange that someone would attend a basket party wearing black lace panties. Even though I don't usually check my wife's underwear, I did so that evening and discovered it to be sticky and wet. In my pocket, I placed them. That night, I felt obligated to search through my wife's wallet and purse, something I had never done before. Her smartphone was the only item that caught my attention. She hadn't deleted any calls from the previous week, suggesting that she was sure I wouldn't pry. Her buddy Luna received the majority of the calls, but KCKH and KW also received a sizable number of incoming and outgoing calls. I immediately deduced that the CH and W probably stood for sell home and work, even though I had no idea who they were. I was astonished by how formally my wife had arranged her phone when I looked through her address book and saw that Luna 2 had 3 numbers listed. Luna C, Luna H, and Luna W. I saw that Luna's work number had an extension when I looked at it. Likewise, KW's number was the same as Luna's, with the exception of a noticeable extension. It was then that I realized Jane was speaking to someone who worked with Luna. In addition, it was clear that Luna had helped to introduce Jane to the mysterious K. Gilbert. Since engineering was not available at the moment, I grabbed Jane's phone and called KW. "Hi, this is the desk of Ken Sanders. I'm not available right now. I will call you back as soon as possible, so please leave your name and phone." I placed the phone down when it beeped. "Are you going to bed, John?" Jane stuck her head through the doorway and asked. "I'm almost done with this book. As long as I don't fall asleep on the couch, I'll be right over," I said. "Yes, no issue," she said, and walked away. But I was going to have a restless night. I kept thinking about what I had done incorrectly, where I had gone wrong, and how I could have corrected it. Well, what a terrible waste of time and thought. I tried to focus on my present responsibilities, but my thoughts kept returning to what I could have done more effectively. Time appeared to have stopped, and I was growing increasingly nervous. But one thing was for sure. I refused to be accountable for what had happened or what was going to happen. I woke up from my sleep to the sounds of my 2 little darlings making breakfast. Instead of depending on others, Jane urged them to take charge of their own lives. Our children were raised in a damn proper manner, and as a result, they were self-sufficient. When my wife entered the room, I yawned and stretched. Jane told me to hurry, "John, if you don't want to be late for work." "Don't worry," I said, "I'm not going to work today." "Why?" she asked. "You never miss work." With a sigh, I said, "Just too many personal issues," and shuffled to the restroom. It was time for a shower. When I got back, Jane seemed perplexed. Our daughters had already left for school by the time I returned. I sat across from my wife after pouring myself a cup of coffee. She gave me a tentative look, as though she was anticipating something but wasn't sure what. So, unwillingly, I broke the silence and said, "Tell me about your infidelity." I knew that she wouldn't reveal everything so readily, but I didn't want to skirt the problem. "Let's face it, Jane, what has been causing your recent distance?" I said. "I'm positive you're cheating on me." "John, are you serious? Why would you consider that after 12 years of marriage?" Puzzled, she answered, "I'm not interested in playing games, Jane. I have things to do today." Not wanting to spend any more time, I said firmly, "I want to ask you again. I requested that you tell me about your affair." With a frustrated moan, my wife leaned closer. "It's all in your head, John. There isn't an affair," she said. "Although I value your candor, I can't thank you for it, can I?" I shot back. As though she had taken charge of the issue, she sat back in her chair and sipped her coffee. "Could you please respond to a few basic questions for me?" I inquired. "Yes, John. What question do you wish to pose?" Jane answered. "Since you haven't attended a PTA meeting in 6 months and the secretary claims that they only hold monthly meetings, why do you go to them every week?" I asked. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her confidence beginning to waver. "Every Tuesday, you and Luna go to non-existent PTA meetings." "You would lie about that, but why?" I pushed. After what seemed like a moment of struggle, Jane eventually explained. "I truly apologize, John, for not telling you that Luna and I were coming to Rosie's Cantina on Tuesday for ladies' night and the 2-for-1 margaritas. We didn't want Billy and you to think we were being untruthful. However, I now realize that it was a mistake to keep it from you. We'll make sure to keep you updated on our plans going forward," she stated. "Thank you for trying to cover for yourself and your friend, Jane, but I'll be making sure everything is legal. What about the other individuals at Rosie's? I'm sure the moon will validate your untrue story." I went on. "I believe you could be exaggerating a little, John." I interrupted her before she could finish. "Why take a shower before going home when you go to Tupperware parties and other events without telling us?" She took her time responding. "At those gatherings, a lot of women smoke, and I always attempt to get the odor out of my hair when I get home. John, it's not a big problem. I keep asking questions. I want to know, why do you attend these events wearing expensive underwear? Except on certain occasions, you seldom dress so sexily for me. You dress to impress each time you spend an evening with these housewives." She continued to tell me lies. I have no idea why I feel the way I do. Sometimes when I go out, all I want is to feel like I'm dressed up. I knew it was time to stop her falsehoods since I was starting to become tired of them. It was fair, I was upset, and I was finding it more and more difficult to control myself. Last night, I placed my wife's underwear on the table. When you return home, the crotch was wet and coated in a sticky substance. I'm positive it's not mine, and I know what it looks like. I'll lose it if you even consider telling me that you have a yeast infection. Jane avoided making eye contact with me as she fidgeted in her seat. She didn't appear to have an immediate response. "Jane, why did you wear soiled underwear home from yesterday night? I require an explanation." I was almost about to lose it. "John, stop it," she pleaded. "Enough. I'm at my breaking point." I cried out. "Our marriage has lasted for 12 years. How could you be so cruel to me?" I had now reached my breaking point because of the unrelenting barrage of lies and my inability to acknowledge the reality. I threw my half-full coffee cup across the room with all my effort, breaking the microwave oven's front. Jane was no longer able to ignore me. She had never seen me angry before, and I had never seen that look on her face. I spoke louder than before, leaning forward on the table and looking directly at her. "Ken Sanders, who the hell is he?" In an attempt to evade me one final time, she pushed herself out of the chair and backed away to the sink. "Ken Sanders, who the hell is he?" I said it again. "Friend," she said, her voice shaking, "just a friend." "Have sex with him." "With him? You cheated on me." I was angry and hateful in my voice. Yes, I did," she said, her voice displaying obvious dread. "Last night, did you share a bed with him?" I spoke in a steely tone. Yes, I did," she said in an apologetic tone. "Stop this, John, please. I apologize. She stood by the sink, trembling violently, and begged, "Just stop, please." I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee after grabbing one from the cabinet. Jane's cell phone rang as I took a seat. She gave me a tense look before responding. "It's from Ken, your sweetheart." Before taking the call, I said, "I think we'd better answer," and hit the speakerphone. "Sugar, good morning. You attempted to phone me last night on my office number, which I discovered when I arrived at work. Jane, did you leave something at home?" Should I say sugar instead? The phone roared Ken's voice. You ought to have noticed Jane's face at that precise moment. Standing there, she was unsure of how to respond. "Are you there, Jane? Is everything okay?" Ken inquired. I gave her a nod in response as she looked at me in fear. Ken, she stumbled. "This is my hubby. He is aware of us. The phone is on speaker for him." At last, she confessed. But Ken didn't answer either. I spoke up, feeling obligated to free him from the embarrassment. "I agreed to come see you this afternoon, Ken, but I have some things to do this morning." Before hanging up and putting the phone back in my pocket, I suggested that you put 911 on your speed dial. Jane was clearly shaken as she stood in her bathrobe beside the sink. I must go now, I remarked sharply. I have one more inquiry. What is the name of Luna's current partner? Please, John. It was too late, yet she pleaded. The second cup broke against the tile wall behind the sink after flying through the air. She flinched and opened her mouth to speak, but it seemed like her breath had been stolen away. I also raised my voice. Calvin. Bostic, Calvin. This afternoon, I'll be back. By then, please have everything you own removed. Until we can arrange for someone else to watch the girls, my mother will do it. I'll bring you anything that you can't fit in your car. Tell my mom where you'll be, please. Stay away from me. When I walked away without saying anything further, she stayed put. I felt disoriented and unsure of my next course of action. I made the decision to visit Billy's workplace as a friend and let him know what was going on. Luna and Calvin had obviously become friends after meeting at work. Calvin must have known someone named Ken who was in need of a date. It was the best explanation I could think of, but perhaps it was too straightforward. Sadly, Billy wasn't present. He was out placing pegs or something at a construction site. Instead, I called his cell phone number. I started, "I'm sorry to bother you, Billy, but I have some terrible news. Has anyone been harmed?" With concern, he inquired. "Not yet," I said solemnly, "but someone will be." "What in hell are you discussing?" He made a demand. "On all the nights that Jane and Luna claim to be attending meetings and Tupperware parties, they have been having affairs with some guys. They have been deceiving us." "Are you certain?" Billy sounded doubtful. "Just ask Luna about a person named Calvin Bostic. I know it seems strange. He and she both work at Gilbert. There, I believe, she also introduced Jane to someone." I clarified. "Oh, are you certain?" Billy swore. "Yes, I did confirm that I am." "Oh no, John. Calvin Bostic, I know. Together, we received our diplomas. He also mentioned the tall, thin man named Ken Sanders. Jane will probably alert Luna as soon as she can. Jane attempted to mislead me this morning before I persuaded her to tell the truth. Luna would undoubtedly give you the same justifications." After Billy hung up, I went to personnel to ask for a brief leave of absence. I didn't feel like working at the moment. I was able to move my work to another draftsman in 10 minutes. Just then, Jane's phone rang, and the caller ID displayed Luna's name. "What the devil is happening, Jane? He is also en route." Luna frightened. "Oh, someone told him something." It was everything I could do not to respond. "Are you there, Jane?" Luna insisted that now was not the time to play games. "Hello, Luna. This is John." Jane's phone was dead this morning, so I had to use hers. I spoke up. "Are you referring to packing her belongings? Is she leaving?" Confused, Luna asked. I confirmed that she will be returning to live with her parents for some time. I couldn't help but smile as Luna paused on the other end of the line. I could only speculate about what was going through her head. "Perhaps you should alert Calvin that Billy is approaching rather than worrying about Jane." I suggested that he get a head start. "God forbid. This isn't possible." No, Luna yelled and then abruptly hung up on me. Her courage astounded me. Fortunately, we only had one credit card, so it was easy to cancel. Even though we had an ABM debit card, it only took me 5 minutes to change the PIN. I chose to leave the bank account open for the time being because I wasn't sure what to do with it. I hoped Jane didn't take any checks with her because I needed money to pay my utilities and bills. My phone rang out of the blue, and it was Billy. He beat Calvin Bostic in the parking lot after dragging him out of the Gilbert building by the scruff of the neck. Calvin wanted me to let his brother in Lancaster know that he was in jail so that he could post bail for him. After phoning his brother and deciding there was nothing I could do to improve Billy's circumstances, I headed to Taco Bell for lunch. I went to my parents' house later to tell them what had happened. My mother graciously offered to look after my girls for a while, spending the week at my place and the weekends with the twins. I then visited Ken Sanders. Since they could see the parking lot where everything happened, the Gilbert Drawing Department colleagues excitedly told me about Billy's visit that morning. Billy caught Calvin and threw him to the ground before he could get to his BMW. The security personnel made an unsuccessful attempt to yank Billy away. After a while, the police were summoned, and Calvin had to be taken away in an ambulance while Billy was arrested. It became clear to me that Ken Sanders had abruptly departed earlier that day when I was shown his now vacant workspace. Luna's desk was empty, too, although it looked as if she had been there just a few seconds earlier. I went to the parking lot after getting Ken's house address. It was a simple ranch-style home without a garage. A white Lexus with its back doors and trunk open was parked in the driveway. Ken Sanders came out with a pile of clothes as I got closer to the front door. He dropped everything and hurried back inside when he saw me. When I observed this coward fleeing in disgrace, I couldn't help but laugh. In contrast to Billy, I appeared entirely amiable and non-aggressive. The fact that the house seemed completely equipped suggested that it was probably a rental. He didn't need a truck for his humiliating getaway because of this. However, he probably would have completed whatever business he had and left in 10 minutes. I wanted to talk to Ken, but I wasn't going to bother to find him. I chose to peek around the room instead, looking for anything of interest. I found some fascinating objects, which satisfied my interest. Ken's cell phone was one of them, and I grabbed it right away. There was a folder with Ken's passport and other personal papers on a desk in the living room, along with his cell phone. Additionally, there was a sophisticated laptop on the room's dining table. Since I couldn't locate anything else of interest, I collected everything that caught my attention and made my way out. And even though I detested Ken at the time, I refrained from smashing his automobile, even though it would have been worthwhile. Even though I knew it might be against the law to take things from the house, the fact that the door was left open made it seem like anyone could have done so. However, I couldn't resist pulling a small practical joke. Even so, I blew air out of one of his car's wheels. In order to get to the spare, he would have to unload the trunk, and I couldn't help but picture him looking around nervously for me. Even though I was aware that what I had done was a little juvenile, I was sure Ken had heard me clearly. I can handle this goat at any time, so he won't be able to unwind and won't be scared to come to me. I made the decision to go see Billy at the jail, but when I got there, I saw that his brother was already there taking care of legal issues. I decided to grin and wave at Billy instead of interrupting, trusting that he had everything under control. When I got home, I discovered that my mother had already come and started making dinner. We chatted for a little while, and then I took the things I had collected from Ken's residence back to the den. Unfortunately, Beth and Britt came home from school before I could look through the contents. I knew I should tell them the truth. Before they could inquire, I gave them the rundown. "Where's Mom, Dad? Why is Nana here?" Bethany's curiosity got the better of me. I said, "Well, your mom and I have decided to take a little break from each other," which caused Beth to roll her eyes and Brittany to smile. I triumph. Funny, I triumph. Britt gloated, "I told you so," to which her sister scowled. I was curious as to what was so remarkable. I questioned Brittany about the reasons behind their actions. Beth and I bet on it. Even though my mother insisted that it would never happen, I had suspected her of being unfaithful. Well, she said, I was right, and I had to respond. "However, Dad, I never implied that your mother was cheating. We are not gullible. Therefore, please refrain from treating us like children and demeaning us. We know what is happening. I just did not want to admit it. Brittany is right. Sadly, our mother will cheat on you, Dad. However, how did you find out?" My face froze when I asked the inquiry. "You may be overly trusting and a little slow to pick things up, Dad." It felt weird when Brittany wrapped her arm around my shoulder. Seeing a 12-year-old daughter attempt to console her father was strange. Britt and I wanted to join Mom and Luna while they went shopping at King of Prussia. Mom, however, insisted that it was a day for adult shopping and assured us that she would make up for it later. Some schoolchildren reported seeing her with a man at Nobles Grove the following Monday. At first, we thought their assertions were false. However, one of the girls displayed a picture on her phone to us. It appeared to be unquestionable evidence. I initially tried to defend my mother, believing that there had to be a reason for everything. Britt, however, was certain that she was absolutely cheating. "Why did you not tell me?" They both shrugged when I asked. Tracy Mercer's parents noticed Luna, Mom, and two men in Allentown TGI Fridays after a few weeks. When they got home, they told Tracy the news, according to my daughter. I sat there, stunned. Fortunately, Nana invited us to dinner, so we didn't bring up the subject at the table. I left before dessert was served. It was a relief that the twins chose not to discuss the issue for the rest of the evening. I started browsing Ken's laptop when his phone started ringing. I got a text message that said, "Dear Ken, I apologize for the inconvenience. Jane, love." I'm not very good with texting, but I had no problem understanding it. Luna and Jane were together because the message was sent from Luna's phone. It was impossible for me to resist answering. I replied with a text, "Tom J. She will now undoubtedly realize that I have Ken's phone." Over the course of the following few hours, I went through Ken's computer's files and directories. Jane and Ken didn't communicate via email very much. Later on, I noticed a few texts that caught my attention that were sent between Ken and his old buddies in Lancaster. I was shocked and disappointed by what I read. Despite spending almost our entire lives together, I came to the realization that I had never really known Jane. She appeared to have a closer relationship with Ken in less than a year than she had with me in nearly 2 decades. Tears were running down my face as I changed the printer cartridge. I don't usually cry, but the hurt caused by Jane's adultery was like salt on my wounds. Maybe that's why my tears felt like they would never stop. As proof, I printed out a dozen photos and a few emails. I was out of paper, but I would have printed more pictures. Surprisingly, there was not the slightest trace of vulgarity or intimacy in any of the pictures. These all appeared to be friendly pictures. Beth stuck her head in and asked if she could contact her mom while I was working. I couldn't bring myself to turn down my daughter's request. The twins were conversing with Jane while my mother was with them. She became an unintentional witness to their talk even though she didn't intend to listen in. During their talk with Jane, the girls didn't seem to be trying to hide anything. Mom then told me that they didn't offer Jane any wiggle room and blamed her for the problem. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. I discovered some really fascinating emails. Ken apparently received an opportunity to work as an engineer for an alternative power plant in Spain after applying for the post. He hadn't given notice to Gilbert, his current employer, even though he was scheduled to start in 6 weeks. No one else at Gilbert brought it up, but I'm sure Luna was aware of it. With the exception of his passport, which I held, Ken had all the paperwork required for the trip. He could find a replacement, but if he wanted to make his start date, he had to act quickly. He could tell the police that I had taken it if he wanted to, but he would have to hurry. But I didn't believe Ken would take that path. After all, he still hadn't booked a flight. Many facts were clarified by one of his emails to a close buddy. As soon as Jane joined Ken in Spain, I learned that she was going to file for divorce. When she realized that I would never allow her to travel abroad with our girls, she considered having me deemed an unfit father. Although the letter didn't explain exactly how she planned to carry out this plan, it implied that it would be severe enough to deny me custody of our twins and visitation privileges. They had a cunning and pernicious strategy. But from these scoundrels, what else are you to expect? I was forced to rely on second-hand information because, regrettably, Ken, not Jane, wrote the letter. I would prefer to hear it straight from Jane. I saw that Mom had fallen asleep while watching my daughters after printing out several copies of the letter. I recommended that she go to our bedroom to rest. The girls were in their beds, fast asleep. I, on the other hand, had fallen asleep on the couch after drinking 4 bottles of beer. I was startled awake by the smell of sizzling bacon and freshly poured coffee. As usual, Mom's morning dish was exquisite. The girls had completed their cereal by the time I arrived at the table. A few innocuous jokes about me had to be heard before I could start eating my beautifully prepared scrambled eggs. Before it came time for the bus, the mood was upbeat. Girls, I'm afraid your mother will try to divide us. She wants to keep you to herself by accusing me of being a bad parent. I won't give up my right to visit and be with you, but I'm okay with shared custody if it means you two will be happy. Although I don't want my dear daughters to feel as though they must choose between their mother and father, I do want them to fully comprehend the circumstances. I told my girls they will tell lies about me, but don't believe them. Our intelligence is more than you realize, Dad. Avoid worrying about anything. We love Mom, but we will not allow her to hurt us or you. As they left, Beth gave me the thumbs up and Brittany smiled at me. Mom filled her own cup and sat next to me. John, relax. Everyone is on your side. I shaved and showered before putting on some clothes I don't typically wear. This look, but I wanted to look more stunning than normal this time. I was a little nervous when I left the house. I was carrying 3 cell phones in my pockets. Quite strange, isn't it? Even though I might not need it, I recalled myself to purchase a charger for the cell phone I took from Kent. I wanted to be prepared. At the Family Services office, I signed in and waited for a caseworker to call. When it was finally my turn, I was embarrassed since I knew the woman who had come to help me. It's been more than 10 years since I last saw you, John Terrell. Have you been doing anything? She asked. In high school, Jody Mitchell stood out as a unique person. She belonged to the group of goth girls that always hung around and had their own gang. They were shunned by most of the other students, especially the jocks like me. She looked normal today, but the dark eye makeup, black lipstick, and pink streak in her hair will always remind me of her. The most extraordinary thing about this gothic group was that it was hard to tell if they were interested in illegal drugs or witchcraft, or if they belonged to some kind of demonic organization. Probably none of those things applied to Jody. However, people tend to assume the worst. Jay appeared on the nameplate on her desk. Mitchell, stating that she hasn't gotten married in the last 12 years. John, I could understand that. How can I help you? My thoughts were interrupted by her question. I started stuttering a little. Jody, you look amazing. She laughed at my uneasiness. Are you referring to my former appearance? I didn't want to give away anything, especially concerning her past, therefore I felt uncomfortable. John, calm down. When I discovered that I had enough intelligence to see the world as it is and that I don't require any masks for it, I was practically done with college. For almost 10 years, I've been what you may call normal. Compared to before, I'm a lot more comfortable with ordinary. Frustrated, she halted. However, that sounds patronizing. I find it difficult to control my speech. Please pardon me. Why are you here now? I asked a question first. I have a question before we start. Are there any documents or reports you have about me? Anything. She had the grace of a pianist as she played the keys. John, nothing here. Jane Wilcox was your wife, correct? Indeed, there is nothing in her name either. You two appear to be caring for your children and not hurting them. I take it you have children. Yes, we have 12-year-old twin girls named Bethany and Brittany. All right, John, let's talk about the problem that led you here. Unfortunately, we hear about such circumstances rather frequently. Is there a good reason why your wife wants to bring the girlfriends along? When a mother comes to us, she usually has some kind of record or proof to back up her statements. I take it that you have verified that there is currently nothing on file. John, you're right. I can see why you might be worried about being accused, though. Before coming to us, your wife might be compiling police or medical reports. We can't assume that there haven't been any events just because we don't see anything in our system. So, if I have this right, you don't think I'll succeed. I answered her. I'm not saying that, though. She cut me off right away. Why do you suppose she will behave in this manner? The letter I discovered on that jerk Ken's laptop was something I didn't want to show anyone. But things were rapidly shifting. If I wasn't going to distribute them, I questioned why I had created copies. Jody took one from me. How did you obtain this? She inquired. I unlawfully took it out of the computer. This serves as evidence of what is happening, even though I am aware that it cannot be used as evidence in any legal proceeding. The legal jargon is unfamiliar to me. I'm not sure how to approach this, so I came here to ask you or anyone else in this office for help. I don't know how to protect myself and my girls from this circumstance, and I can't afford to hire a lawyer. I completed my speech. Jody Mitchell sat down slowly as I watched her without flinching. She gave me a couple swaying motions before bending toward me. Is there any chance you could come back tomorrow morning? Yes, for me, that works. I will see you in the future. She wanted to keep a copy of the email before I left the room. With a nod of assent, I headed for the door. John, it was good to see you, Jody replied, and I smiled back for the same reason. I no longer saw the goth chick at that precise moment. Rather, I noticed a new aspect of Jody. I had to choose a lawyer from the phone book because I didn't know any or anyone who did. I was aware that my wife intended to file for divorce, but I couldn't risk anything at this time. I wanted to be ready because the financial situation was going to be unpredictable in the next weeks. To ensure that everything was handled as swiftly and formally as possible, I thus hired a lawyer in full upfront. Since the house's value had dropped below the mortgage, I told the lawyer that my wife may have it if she so desired. But at the very least, I want shared custody of our twins, and if feasible, complete custody. I consented to pay child maintenance. Billy called me on my way to have lunch because he needed a place to stay. Naturally, I offered to have him stay with me. We made the decision to get together for their gourmet lunch package at Taco Bell. I saw a foolish smile on his face as I approached him. You can't be so joyful. What's happening? I inquired. He clarified that he had received an update on Calvin from a mutual acquaintance who works at Community General Hospital. Luna had apparently visited him there. Luna felt duped and perplexed when his wife unexpectedly showed up with their 2 kids while she was seeing Calvin at the hospital. The scene got so bad that Luna had to be escorted out by hospital security. She had already resigned her work and was no longer there when I went by Gilbert to talk to her. I'm not sure, but I think she's at home now. I don't know why Calvin didn't come home to his family on the weekends or why his wife wasn't living with him. Honestly, I don't give a damn about such specifics. Billy made the decision to take a week off work in order to organize his affairs. We needed to find Billy a place to sleep because my mom was staying at my house. We devised a strategy, but he had to visit his home to collect his clothing and personal items. In the end, he chose not to talk to Luna in case she wasn't present. Another call on my cell phone interrupted me as I was heading to meet with my insurance agent. It's Cameron Wilcox, John. Would you be able to spend some time at the house to assist with the situation? He said on the phone. Jane is a mess, and her mother isn't making things any easier. Who is going to be present? I asked. Cameron answered, the 3 of us and Jane's sister, Carla. I committed to arrive in 20 minutes, but I wasn't sure what I could achieve. I declined the offer of coffee when I got there and brought my folder containing all the proof. Who would like to start? I inquired. Carla responded, Jane seems to think you're overreacting. She claims that because you were so furious, you forced her to make up lies in order to please you. She maintains that you have no right to blame her and kick her out of the house because she has done nothing wrong. Based on all that was mentioned, I concluded that she did not tell her parents the truth about what actually transpired. She thus presented her version of events. I was annoyed that she placed all the blame on me, even though I understand that she might not want to tell them about her infidelity. What do you want me to do, Cameron? Should I convince her that she is lying or give in to my pressure? After being persuaded, I asked if you could give us some information so we can better comprehend the problem. What information about her alleged partner did she divulge? I inquired. She insists that you misunderstood the scenario, claiming that she didn't have one and that she only had a few drinks with some friends from Luna's business. I had had enough of this bullshit. Cameron, she spoke on the phone with this so-called casual buddy more than 80 times in the last month. Did she call both you and her mother at the same time? He and her mother turned to face Jane, who was staring at the floor. Does it sound like someone she occasionally goes out for drinks with casually? As I took out Ken's cell phone, the room became quiet. Can you read text messages, Carla? Shortly after I ejected her, she emailed this to her alleged casual acquaintance. What if you read it out loud so that everyone can hear it? Carla took the phone from me and read, Dear Ken, I apologize for the issues. Love Jane. I got the phone back from Carla. Do you believe that individual was merely a casual acquaintance? I asked everyone in the room. Cameron shook his head slowly. Jane put her hands over her face, and I continued speaking. Jane and her buddy Luna claimed a few weeks ago that they were going shopping at the King of Prussia Mall. The twins begged their mother to let them go, but she refused. These are a few of the pictures taken throughout the trip. After looking through the 6 pictures I provided him, Cameron handed them to Martha and Carla. He said, This doesn't seem like King of Prussia. It appears to be Noble's Grove. Jane, what the devil is going on? Up until that point, Martha had remained quiet. "You're holding on to this man's arm in every picture like your life depends on it," she said. "Friends don't act like that. These photos make it clear that the man is more than simply a friend. What were you trying to accomplish here?" Tears slowly and softly trickled down her cheeks. This was not what she had expected, and she was not ready for it. "Here are a couple more similar pictures," I added, holding them up. "One seems like it's from Red Lobster, and I think 2 of them are from the Olive Garden. I have a few more. Fortunately, my beloved wife is completely dressed in each of them." "John, I think we've seen enough. I'm sorry I called you here for this," he said. The way he had been duped seemed to upset Cameron. Jane came out of the room sobbing like a kid as I got up from my chair. We never got around to talking about the stains on her underwear, but it didn't seem important at the time. I was led to the front door by Cameron. As I left, he shook my hand and said, "John, I'm sorry we can't undo what has happened, but I promise it won't be forgotten." When I got home, Billy and my mother had set up a rollaway bed in the computer room, which also served as a tiny second bedroom. In the corner was a pile of extra clothes Billy had brought from home. Fortunately, Luna wasn't home when he got home. The mail, or rather, the letter addressed to Jane, was the most interesting thing waiting for me when I got home. The passport office had sent a beautiful official envelope. Even though I knew I shouldn't have opened it, I couldn't help but be curious. I discovered a family passport inside that included a picture of Jane and her 2 daughters. I recalled the girls telling me that they had taken a picture, but I was unable to even imagine why they had taken it. Of course, the mail included no passport for me. I called Cameron right away and told him to let Jane know her passport had come. She only needed to send Ken to pick up her passport from my residence if she wanted to acquire it. I stated unequivocally that I would only give Ken the passport. If the mail had arrived, I would normally have been at work and would not have realized it had reached her. Cameron told me that they had asked Jane to find another place to stay, but they didn't know where she would go. They appeared to be a little annoyed with their daughter. He promised to let her know about the passport at a later time. We solely talked about our girls during our supper, which really piqued my interest. "We received a visit from a family services worker today," Bethany recalled with a sly smile. "Jody was her name," I said, curiosity piqued. "Did she talk to each of you separately or all at once?" "Together," Bethany answered. "She said that although you attended the same high school as her, you were not friends." After Britt gave me a sour look for Bethany's snarky comment, I snapped out of it and said, "What did Jody want to talk to you about?" Bethany gave a shrug. "We assumed that since she only mentioned you, we could be certain that she liked you." "How much time did it take you to explain this to her?" Curiosity was burning through me. We missed Jim's lesson and a portion of geography since we talked to her for more than an hour. Jody and Bethany were talking at the same time, and I was having trouble following along. Parla interrupted our supper by calling and asking me to meet with her so we could have a crucial chat. She started talking to us after we met her at McDonald's and sat at a corner table enjoying 2 hot coffees. Jane couldn't explain the matter herself, so she requested me to do it for her. "I understand it might sound absurd," Jane remarked. She had never had a romantic or thrilling experience. She was exclusively with you, a devoted and trustworthy husband. But Luna convinced Jane to join them for dinner and cocktails when Ken Sanders joined Gilbert. Jane and Ken would often be left alone during their outings since Luna and Calvin would often disappear for private times. Over time, Jane and Ken started having physical interactions. This soon became a full-fledged affair. Jane discovered that once the improper connection started, she had no control over it. Jane had been enthralled by Ken's stories of adventures past and future, and she wanted to be with him and share in the experience. She enthusiastically agreed to travel to Spain when he suggested it. But leaving the girls, rather than you, was the most challenge. Jane thought of methods to portray you as an inadequate father since she knew you would never let her take them abroad. She now understands, however, that the females are closer to you than to her after talking to them. After giving it some thought, she has now decided not to keep the twins provided you consent to a divorce without any issues. "All right," I said, "that's settled. Instruct her to go ahead and file the documents. If everything is as you claim, I won't argue." Then she suddenly recalled something. "One more thing, John. Jane is requesting her passport. Are you carrying it with you?" I finally started to comprehend their intentions and activities after hearing what she had to say. It appears that Jane, my awful wife, is still considering taking the girls with her. I shuddered at the idea of Jane taking the girls with her. Unless she possessed a secret weapon, they would struggle and resist at every turn. My pulse raced as the family passport was brought up. "My coffee is cold. All right, Carla. I'm going to take a hot shower at home." I got up and said, "Please don't contact me again." She yelled, "What's wrong?" As I turned to leave. "I've returned home. Have I offended you in any way?" I shot back, fuming. "You're perfectly aware of what you did to Jane, and you really think I'm that stupid. Make sure your soul sister knows that she will never touch my daughters again. I further caution you against approaching my girls because you chose to assist your useless sister in this terrible enterprise." Carla had a bewildered expression on her face as she spoke to someone on the phone when I left McDonald's. I believe she was speaking to my wife, but I can only speculate who she was speaking to. Eager to speak with Jody, I got to the family services office before it opened. Jody came in with a Starbucks cup and a big smile on her face while I was waiting. She apologized for not getting me more coffee and asked me to sit down. I apologize, Jody remarked. I think you know that I spoke to your daughters yesterday, and I grinned and nodded. I felt as though I wasn't comfortable and that I couldn't articulate my ideas clearly for some reason. I felt precisely the same way the last time I spoke with Judy, so it wasn't the first time. I never had the opportunity to learn how to interact with other women because I had lived my entire life with Jane. Unfortunately, it seemed that my inexperience was now costing me dearly. John, is everything all right? Jody asked. No, aside from everything. It wasn't that I was trying to be smart. Simply put, I'm having trouble putting my ideas into words. I apologize for my explanation. I apologize, Jody. I think I'd better get out. I'm not in the appropriate frame of mind for this today. I believe that calling you a bit later would be preferable. All right, but before you go, I have to let you know that I'm working to get a restraining order against your spouse. I can forbid her from taking your daughters out of the state or limiting your access to them, but I cannot stop her from spending time with them. She will receive the order by lunchtime today. I grinned widely since this was such wonderful news. I'll head to the closest Starbucks after leaving the office. Coffee smells nice, but after today's events, my feelings are all over the place. I drive around in circles before returning home. Billy claimed that Luna had moved back to her parents' house in Ephrata, so he could now go back to his own house for the time being until he could sell or rent it out. There were no company policies barring fraternization. He found out in the morning as he juggled appointments at the bank, insurance firm, and lawyer's office in an effort to get paid by Gilbert. He was cautioned by his attorney that this would be a difficult case. He found out later at the hospital that his wife was taking care of the required paperwork for Calvin's discharge. She saw Billy before he could get away, so she stopped him and tactfully stated that she was trying to convince Calvin to drop the charges against him. She thanked Billy for his help, which surprised him. She seems to have been trying unsuccessfully to change Calvin for years. I was sitting on the front porch drinking a beer after Billy had left. With a drink in hand, Mom sat with me for a time while bringing me a meatloaf sandwich and not saying anything. Just as Jody Mitchell pulled up, she announced her dad was coming over for supper and would be staying overnight. Jody sat down next to me as Mom vanished into the house, but she turned down my offer of a cold beer. She broke the silence after we had been silent for a while. About an hour ago, Jane said, I served her with the papers. She is currently residing with her sister after becoming enraged. I swigged from the long neck in my palm as she concluded her sentence. That must have been one good thing that came out of it. Why am I feeling so awful? I inquired. She said that in these circumstances, there is neither good nor bad, only less or more awful. After a moment of hesitation, I reached for another beer and put it back in the cooler. Could you please stop by and tell the girls everything? I questioned her. No matter how carefully I word things, it will sound like I'm criticizing their mother, even though I get along with them quite well. I'm afraid I'll annoy them. That is not what I want to occur. Tonight, how about 7? With a nod of assent, she rose from her chair and made her way to her vehicle. Halfway through, she paused and turned back to face me, which gave me hope. She smiled back at me when I smiled. Jody came over that night and spent a good deal of time with Beth and Britt. Billy and I, meanwhile, were busy going through his stuff and getting rid of anything that reminded him of Luna or that belonged to her. As time went on, Jody started coming to the house many times a week. She soon began to spend as much time with my mother as she did with the girls. She seemed to be ignoring me, and I couldn't help noticing that. I was curious, but I was also happy with that. She sat next to me one night after the girls had gone to bed. I was desperate to talk to her, but she interrupted me before I could start a conversation. Are you drinking any wine, Danny? I stammered out my answer. Sort of. I could still do better when it comes to talking. What are you saying? I confess that I'm worried I don't have anything with a cork in it. My entire wine collection is screw tops. To her surprise, this was funny. Would you bring the entire bottle of red wine and pour me a glass? She asked. Even though the bottle was more of a chuck than a premium vintage, I complied. After we took a sip of our wine, I finally plucked up the bravery to say something. I've noticed that your visits are very beneficial to the girls, I said. For what length of time must you keep seeing them? Oh, she said, the twins are doing fine. They don't need me around. I've come to visit you. I said, I'm confused. I presume that's what you wanted because you hardly talk to me when you're here. Not really, she said with a quiet laugh. I added that I was only worried about your policy against mingling with consumers. Her laughter in return calmed me down and made me feel more at peace. She said, I'm surprised you haven't asked to see my tattoos. Which tattoos? I asked, understanding that she was trying to get me to relax by having a lighter chat with me. I liked her cleverness, and it was an excellent concept. She claimed that although I had 3 tattoos in conspicuous location, one was done in a secret location. Will you let me know where she is, or will I need to look for her on my own? I asked in jest. She backed me up with her response, it's much nicer to look for them, but if you decide to do it, I'll need some more wine. As I filled her glass to overflowing, we both laughed. Because we had to keep quiet so as not to wake my girls, this game was more thrilling. Finally, I found the fourth one in a remote spot and gazed at it for a long time. She departed just as the twins were about to wake up, but I had a weird suspicion that my kids were aware of what had transpired. I got in touch with my attorney and asked him to complete the divorce documents and set up their delivery. Jane had no choice than to comply with my demands or act independently. She was still living with Carla when the papers were served, but she didn't respond, and I didn't even get a call. After a few weeks, my father's health deteriorated. Instead of remaining with me, my mother was spending more and more time taking care of him. Luckily, the school year was coming to a close, and the girls spent the summer at my mother's house. My father had been moved into an assisted living facility at the end of the season. My mother came back in with me after Billy and I helped her get the family house ready for sale. Jody had been spending 3 or 4 evenings a week with me and seeing the girls at my mother's house during the summer. They often went shopping and went out to eat together, and I was happy that Brittany and Bethany were getting attention. At least I no longer felt uncomfortable. I was pretty sure they knew what was going on between Jody and me. Jane called the girls about once a week, but her calls were short and, my mother says, seemed tense most of the time. She called, but my girls didn't even bother to notify me. Billy and Luna were formally divorced, but I didn't know how mine was going. In addition, he had decided to start his own surveying business and asked me to accompany him. I didn't have much money to give until my mother helped me out. Medicare would pay for my father's expenses if my mother and father ran out of money. Instead of seeing it all evaporate, she thought I ought to use it for the company. She probably saw it as an investment in her future as well. Fortunately, 3 months after Billy and I started our own little surveying business, my drawing skills translated to plot illustration. Jane, the twins' mother, paid them a visit approximately a week after the new semester began. Both of them were shocked to see Jane because they thought they were headed to the guidance office to speak with Jody. Even though the twins tried to be polite and respectful toward her, the interaction was unpleasant. She expressed her affection for them and expressed regret for the way things had ended out. She pledged to send postcards to the historic castles she was visiting in Spain. She also promised to send them amazing Christmas presents and to get in touch with them every year on their birthdays. She was crying when she went, they informed me. Jane didn't get in touch with me or let me know she was leaving. However, the following week, her parents showed up at the residence. They expressed regret for Jane's behavior once more, but they made no effort to defend or explain it. They wanted to spend time with their only grandchildren, Brittany and Bethany. I even accepted their proposal without raising any objections. They said Carla was caught between her parents and sister and was too embarrassed to come see me. My divorce was formally approved 2 months later. It was a rare night out without the ladies, so Jody and I celebrated by going to Red Lobster to eat. It didn't seem to worry them. In fact, I believe they were happy to get some time off. We spent the night at the Holiday Inn, which is close by. My twins were really happy when I got home at 10 the next morning, but they remained silent. All day long, they smiled broadly. My father had died a year later, but our company was doing well. My mom wanted to move to Florida with her brother, but she didn't want to leave the girls behind. The twins thought their grandmother ought to leave. Even though Jody isn't as good as my mom at cooking, they said she could take her place. They also asserted with assurance that they were old enough to have rooms of their own. It was an obvious and successful tactic. My girls' mother never contacted them for Christmas, but she did send them postcards featuring pictures of Old Spanish Castle and birthday greeting cards. She donated 2 beautiful outfits with embroidery, but it seems that she was unaware of how quickly children grow older, particularly during puberty. The fact that the dress didn't fit, however, didn't bother my daughters in the least. Our most important client turned out to be Gilbert Engineering. Although it was a big step down from his previous position, Billy was happy to learn that Calvin was teaching electronics at Lebanon County Vocational School. Ken hadn't been able to hold down his new job for more than 6 months, and Luna had remarried and moved to California. Billy wanted to know where Sanders was now employed, therefore he was trying to discover his high school alumni group. He believed that Ken handled issues too readily. It should come as no surprise that my daughters kept getting postcards of old Spanish castles. There was no specific information on these postcards. According to Cameron, she informed me over the phone that she is currently employed with a travel agency. However, she never brought up Ken or provided any information regarding their relationship. After Judy and I traveled to Maryland for our small wedding, she became pregnant a year later. The arrival of a new family member pleased my daughters. My life became more joyful overall, and I stopped dwelling on my mistakes from the past. Why she sent postcards with these castles was the only thing I didn't understand. My comment: what a great story, sometimes you just have to wait to find out. Do you agree? Leave a comment below, hit the bell and sub buttons, and I'll see you in the next one.